Good evening, Shavua Tov. It is the 16th night of the Elul Screen Challenge on our way to Rosh Hashanah. Reading passages from Inner Work of Adat Hashem. We're on page 27. Understanding spiritual matters is not at all dependent on having some kind of natural ability for this. It depends on the effort we make to purify ourselves from selfishness. Understanding spiritual matters is not at all dependent on having some kind of natural ability for this. It depends on the effort we make to purify ourselves from selfishness. So this passage is stating that understanding spiritual matters, you might think, depends upon having a natural ability for this, or that spirituality and spiritual matters and spiritual concepts are complicated and take a lot of ability to understand, and you need to be like super smart, or you need to have all this kind of prior knowledge, or have some kind of natural ability that can understand spiritual concepts. Right? It's kind of demystifying the whole realm of spirituality and spiritual work, and it's saying it only depends on the effort we make to purify ourselves from selfishness. So simple. It's just saying this one simple thing that anybody can do. It only depends on the effort we make to purify ourselves from selfishness, to recognize our self-serving nature, our desire to receive, and working to purify ourselves from this self-serving, self-centered, self-motivated desire to receive. That's it. You don't need to be book smart. You don't need to be brilliant. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be anything. You don't need to have some special spiritual abilities, All you need to do is put forth the effort to purify yourself from selfishness, from self-serving desire to receive. Our souls are divine. Therefore, the desire to experience God and the desire to be in a state of giving always exist within ourselves. At first, our spiritual desires are in a state of potential, and we are disconnected from them. Being in the presence of truly spiritual people and learning the holy books written by these people awakens our souls and arouses us to want to develop spiritually. So our souls are divine. Just fact. Simple fact. Our souls are divine. Therefore, the desire to experience God and the desire to be in a state of giving always exists within ourselves, because our souls are divine, because we are forever intimately connected with the divine as extensions of the divine and the sacred. The desire to experience God and the desire to be in a state of giving always eternally exists within us. I was going to say, especially the desire to experience God, because it is so close to us. It is this extension of ourselves that is lying dormant. And as an effect of that, the state of giving always exists within ourselves. At first, our spiritual desires are in a state of potential. They live in potentiality. Our our souls are sort of sleeping in this state of potential, waiting to be woken up. This part of us that is eternally connected with the divine, it's living in a state of potential for actualization. But we are disconnected from that. We, as our egos, as our identities, as the lives that we live, moving through the world in the day-to-day, we are disconnected from this state of potential. We're disconnected from recognizing ourselves as an extension of the divine. We are disconnected from recognizing and acknowledging, not just as an idea, not just as blind faith, but as a true actuality. We're disconnected from appreciating and acknowledging genuinely our souls as this extension of spirit, our souls as the driver of the body, and the body as an extension of the divine, and as the soul as the piece that can wake up, actualize this reality, and drive the body and be the driver of the body. That the soul, just as now the ego generally is the driver of the body, the soul can be the driver of the body. And that lives in a state of potential because we're disconnected from the spiritual. And thus, being in the presence of truly spiritual people who are awakened to the light of God in the world, the light of God in themselves, living as that light, actualized beings, and as well learning the holy books written by these people, this awakens our souls and it arouses us to want to develop spiritually, right? Being around awakened people, it's like plucking the guitar string of our own souls. They're plucking those strings and it resonates with our own soul strings, and that awakens our souls inside of us and arouses us from our slumber and our sleep, our state of sleepwalking, to then want to develop spiritually, to want then to connect with our souls, to connect with the divine, to connect with our true purpose for being here. The sad thing is, I don't know about you, I don't know how many holy people and truly spiritual or awakened, actualized souls that you come in contact with, but unfortunately I come in contact with very, very few. Sort of a shortage, you might say, or a drought. We live in a desert of spiritually awakened people, and thus it makes sense that our souls are not awakened, and we continue to live in a disconnected state because of that. And again, this is why people, in different cultures and different places flock to gurus and spiritual teachers, because their souls are magnetically drawing them towards them in order to awaken, in order to get on the track towards healing and spiritual awakening. The four spiritual worlds of Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, and Atzilut represent the four general levels of spiritual development that are attained through spiritual work. The four spiritual worlds of Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, and Atzilut represent the four general levels of spiritual development that are attained through spiritual work. So this is a little bit more esoteric, and we won't go into it very deeply, but if you're familiar at all with Kabbalah, you'd be familiar with the four worlds, and as well as the four levels or the 5 levels of the soul. And these four worlds, the Rav is saying, are really a representation of the 4 levels of spiritual development. The sort of lowest is Asiya, and it moves up through Yitzhak, Bria, and Atzilut to the highest level of spiritual development. Page 28. Absolutely nothing in this world is by chance. Everything is drawn from spiritual reality. Everything that appears in this world has a spiritual root and relates in some way to our spiritual work. So some deep faith passage coming down. Absolutely nothing in this world is by chance. Everything is happening for a purpose. Everything is happening for a reason. Everything is drawn from a spiritual reality. So this like deep faith that most of us lack, and I'll say that because I know it, that most of us lack when we walk through the world and we see events taking place, we have conversations that take place. We don't connect that to a spiritual root. We don't recognize that it has that it has a spiritual reality. We may say everything happens for a reason, right? Which is sort of glib and kind of I'm tired and I can't think of the word, but it's someone will write it in the comments, right? It's known. It's a spiritual saying to say everything happens for a reason. And we might think that, right? And maybe the thought is connected to a deeper truth. But to live that is something completely different. It's completely and utterly different. It means that you're walking in each moment connected with the divine, connected with your purpose. And everything that you see and everything that you experience is like God speaking to you, because everything is God. And so when a person talks to you in the street or a person talks to you at the grocery store, it's God talking to you, and you find and feel the thread that connects it to a spiritual reality and that connects it to a spiritual and divine purpose. That's that is a level of consciousness that you and I and most of us know nothing about except for theorizing and philosophizing. But it exists. It's real. Everything that appears in this world has a spiritual root and relates in some way to our spiritual work. If you're moving through the world with living your divine purpose, then everything that comes at you has a relationship to your spiritual work. It just goes hand in hand, right? Because you're moving through purpose. Your purpose is connected with awakening. Your purpose is connected to being a giver in the world. So there's going to be a direct correlation with your spiritual work, with whatever appears, whatever happens, whatever is coming at you. And of course, there's a way to say that there is spiritual bypass in that, and there's a way to spiritual bypass in that. And especially to understand it through a spiritual bypass lens, that then we kind of explain away horrific things that are happening on the planet, or horrific things that have happened to us, as having this, a spiritual root, and thus, it's okay, or it's been resolved, or it's been integrated. But that's a bypass. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is something that, again, we are not privy to the true experience of what it actually means. Even though the books of the Kabbalists, like the Holy Zohar and the writings of the Ari, are filled with physical concepts, the intention is only to describe spiritual soul states. Again, even though the books of the Kabbalists, like the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, and the writings of the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, are filled with physical concepts, they're filled with concepts of physicality, talking about physical things and concepts. The intention is only to describe spiritual soul states. So this is, maybe it's above my pay grade, but I can try to understand it in terms of when it talks about physical concepts, and I need to know exactly what he's pointing to here. Musagim Gashmiim. Physical ideas or physical concepts, physical realities. Yeah, the intention is only to describe spiritual soul states. So this is one that's a little bit out of context, as the translator said earlier, that some of these passages are harder to understand because they're out of context. So we'd have to really understand the context to be able to understand exactly what he's pointing to. The Bala Sulam writes that every single word in the Zohar is spiritual. That's it. The Bala Sulam writes that every single word of the Zohar is spiritual. Well, I mean, every word and every moment is spiritual. So again, this is maybe out of context. I'm not sure. But I don't know. To me, it doesn't resonate super deeply because isn't every word in this book spiritual? Isn't every word that is spoken spiritual because it's sacred, because it has a connection to the divine, because it's here? Does it make, the Zohar different than Mein Kampf? Well, yes, for sure. Isn't every word in the Torah spiritual? So I'm not really sure what the point of saying that that every word that every word in the Zohar is spiritual. All right, we'll end it on that. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful day tomorrow. Blessings.